Well,
Hello.
Kirsten, I mean, I think it's so apropos that we start this conversation with joy and laughter,
Yes.
because there's has been so much of it, in the years that we've gotten to work together, and just in this celebration of the 25 years, unbelievably, that Lyft has been, in existence. And I wonder if you can, share a bit about, the 25 years. Like, what was it like to start an organization as a student, for
Mm.
students, in order to be able to, put forth this big and bold vision, right, around ending poverty?
Gosh.
What were you
Wow.
thinking?
I mean, first off, I really am just I'm like have a full body smile right now. You know that feeling. Um, I'm just I'm so I'm so proud of you and the Lyft team. Um, yeah, just so honored and humbled to be
Mm,
part of this moment. And it's wild to think that it's been a quarter century.
mm,
Um, And, thinking back to starting this as a student, I think over the years, Brian and I have talked a lot about some of the brazen naivete that went into getting this going. And I think there is a reason that so many social movements and organizing efforts over time have come from students and have been campus
yeah.
driven. And a reality that we just were so you can call it naivete or you can call it clarity of mission and purpose.
Mm,
Um, there's something really pure about the mission-driven nature of what we were doing without having necessarily the perspective to worry about all of the, mountains of logistical barriers that might exist between our capacity to envision this and
mm,
make it so. And there's something very powerful about that. It's kind of that idea of like, if I knew all the barriers, I would never do this. But I think for young people who can stay so focused on seeing a wrong in the world that needs to be righted,
yeah.
um, or seeing humanity that's being um, undervalued, or seeing inequity, whatever it is, and needing to address it, you just go right for it. And I feel like that was the passionate spirit that
Mhm,
defined getting Lyft started. And we did this pre-social media,
mm,
but you know, campuses are incredible organizing grounds and word spreads fast. People typically don't yet have big lives and families and other things and can be really focused on going all in building a movement. And so that there was it was a really exciting, just passionate time of mobilization and getting everyone we could get to get involved. And we were college students too, so we had a lot of fun while we were at it.
mhm.
And, we didn't have any money to start the organization, so we threw a big, huge party to raise it. But it was that kind of thing of just saying, we're not going to put barriers in our way to getting this done. And I'm so grateful for it.
Mhm,
I had many,
mhm.
many times over the 20 years of my serving as CEO where I thought, oh my gosh, if I knew how hard this was going to be, I never would have started it.
Mhm. Yeah,
And
yeah.
again, it's part of why I feel so passionate about supporting other young people
Mm,
as they want to start organizations and movements. It's why I'm not at all surprised
mm,
that it is young people who are those in our world most loudly right now crying out for peace, crying out for us to pay attention to our climate disaster,
mhm,
crying
mhm,
out for us to make college affordable. I mean, you
mm.
name it, it just
Lift
remains
up our
that.
identities, right, as we claim, right? Yeah. Yeah.
Young people are our consciences,
Yeah.
and we need to harness that. And we were just so lucky that so many people who brought the wisdom and experience that we lacked were willing to partner with us and take us seriously early on.
Mm,
And I think there's just always been a lot of good faith within LIFT in that way of us taking members really seriously, believing them
mhm,
in terms of their dreams and goals and aspirations and understanding of their own life. And I think we felt that we were taken very seriously
mhm,
by people who were willing to partner with us. I mean, there were a lot of just these virtuous cycles of people advocating for people that, went from member to donor, everything in between. And so it was it really was a pretty magical time of getting the organization started. And thank you for having me look back on it.
mhm,
I don't do it as much as I should.
mm. Well, I mean, I wonder if I can ask you another question just in connection to the idealism and um, um, uh, boldness, courage, matched with maybe some of that ignorance of young people.
Yeah.
Right. And then also I think that that time, at least for me, when I was in college, the veil was really being lifted on a lot of the ways that the world operated that,
Mhm.
were not fair. And just
Yeah.
like big questions about what am I going to do about this? And now taking that to current day, and it seems like emergent conversations happening around, that poverty is not just about the poor people, right? It's also about folks with privilege, being
Yes.
able to be called into those conversations and called
Mhm.
into the change and thinking about how
Yeah.
to let go of that privilege. And I really think about that in connection to the early days of Lyft as well, right? And I think that was really a foundational part of the work that you were doing was like, wait a second, we have access. Let's give that access, right, to make
Mhm.
a change. Can you share a little bit more about that?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I think early on in the formation of Lyft, there was a real spirit of idealism and an obligation for people who had access and had means, including the means to be getting these world-class college educations, to be giving
Mm,
back and kind of sharing that social capital.
mhm,
Um, and that the leaders of tomorrow, as it were, at
mm,
places like Yale, where we were, should be as encouraged to be rooting themselves in community-based organizing and anti-poverty world, in the like community-based organizing and the anti-poverty world as in finance or consulting
mm,
or those other places. So there was, early on, our theory of change involved more of that idea that we are at once providing really critical services to people who lack access to those services, but we're also creating this new generation of better informed, better grounded leaders to change social policy.
mhm, mhm,
I think there's a lot to say for that.
mhm,
Over time, we at Lyft, I think, did a lot of hard work to interrogate some of the noblesse oblige that was baked into that. And I think one of the things I've been proud of over time has been a willingness, without stepping back from our mission or pointing fingers, but to just evolve and to
mhm,
say, we thought that. And again, there's a lot of idealism and precedent. We were inspired by models like Teach for America and others in starting it. And the more we've gotten into the work, the more we're seeing that we are kind of we're perpetuating a certain sense of who's the leader and
Mm-hmm.
who's not.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where we started to shift big parts of the model of saying, actually, you know who the leaders need to be here? The leaders need to be members.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the leaders of the future, not the Yaleys. And we can keep going. I mean, so I'm really proud of the ways that it seems like we have continued, and then we've taken huge leaps in this since you became the leader, just to say, okay, we've got we've got certain notions about how change happens, how it needs to happen in society, how absolutely we want it to happen in a multiracial, cross-class environment where people have the chance to share social capital, learn from one another, and be transformed. But we want to keep, asking ourselves about the ways in which we in our very, very own behavior are reinforcing certain societal dynamics,
Yep.
maybe asking too many questions about poverty and too few questions about privilege.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so let's start bringing that in. And that's what you're starting to do now, even with Liftopolis, or asking too many questions about very kind of short-term social services gaps. Yes, important, but we also need to ask big long-term questions about overarching systems,
Mm-hmm.
policy changes, et cetera. So, um, yeah, when I think about pride points at Lyft, it has tended to be, you know, when we've been willing to, you know, interrogate our own behavior and kind of say, there are no sacred cows here. We are committed to perpetual learning and evolution. Um, and again, it's not about criticizing those that have come before or anything like that, but it's about saying, this is what it means to be an organization that's continuously learning, most importantly from our members, figuring out even how to systematically do that through things like constituent and member voice, and evolving and evolving and evolving.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I actually feel like that is such a part of Lyft's fabric, right? The notion of continuous improvement, right? Not stopping until like good enough is not good enough, right? Not stopping until like we've really achieved the promise of ending generational cycles of poverty. And um, I note that because it's both been like the foundation of how we've been able to continue to get stronger and produce better results and get more clear, and there's more to go, right? But that, and I really truly feel like we've been stepping more fully every single time into the aspiration of what Lyft has been for
Yeah.
25 years,
Yeah.
right? Um, so it doesn't, yeah. I mean, it feels like if I could just like, it doesn't feel like it's a moment of, critique. It feels like it's like continuing on the work, right? That was established 25 years ago. And when I think about just digging in more into that pride and being now with Lyft for 12 years, 12 going
Wow.
on 13 years.
Mm.
Um, and that notion of stripping away our own veil right around
Yeah.
what should be and how things are done, and
Mm-hmm.
having the courage to do things differently. And one of the proudest moments for me is when we were able to give over $1 million to directly back to our members
Yeah.
at the start of the pandemic. And that's because of a couple of things. One is the fact that we had been doing it, right? This is the reason why we were able to
Right.
do it with volume, right?
Yeah.
And because of that, not only were we able to, you know, be a source that people turn to, right, in order to be able to get these funds out, right? Folks all of a sudden were aware that people need money, and unfortunately, it was a crisis like that that brought it to awareness. But that we were able to deliver it, but then also talk about for others how to do that well, how to strip away the barriers, how to make it as simple as possible so it can
Yeah.
actually be accessible, right, to folks. And then the other piece of it that I think was a real eye opener and influential to where we are today is like it allowed me to face into the scarcity that I think that we were strapped into, right? In the
Mhm.
nonprofit world, and
Yes.
with it, like the sense of scarcity, even when we were thinking we were being abundant, right? So when the pandemic first happened, you know, we reached out to members, right, as we do, right, as we, you know, again, have built the muscle to be able to do that. We
Yeah.
asked them what they needed, not knowing how long the pandemic was going to be.
Mm.
At that point, you know, folks were saying we need about $1,000, right? And so we're like, okay, we're going to try to get 50% of that to 50% of the membership, thinking that that was already like a big stretch from what we were doing. And lo and behold, we were able to provide 100% and more to over 100%, right, of members because
Wow.
we're able to extend it to partners as well. And then also able to give even, you know, a few more $100 to those who are undocumented without access at all. And it was, you know, that was like a big, you know, light bulb moment. And like, wow, you know, we need to like, we can hold the biggest aspirations to be true and to become real, right? For Black and Brown families that have,
Yes.
you know, been wrapped up, you know, held back, right, by this scarcity, right? No, we need to really be able to think abundantly about what could and should be true, and that was, you know, influential to us stepping more into the systems change space.
Yeah. Amen. I it's wow. I mean I love that you use the metaphor of the lifting of the veil, very Du Boisian. Um, because I think that is such a critical part of the work of justice,
Mm-hmm.
is that lifting of the veil.
Mm-hmm.
And it is these societally created veils that have allowed so much injustice and inequity to be perpetuated
Yeah, yeah. Can
since
we talk
our
about that
origin.
in terms of the why, right? We do this work. I mean, I think that you're going in this direction, and just in conversations that we've had in the past around, um, you know, the courage it takes to step into the values of this
Mhm.
work, right, beyond the rigor and the, you know, evaluation of the data. Yes, right, got that on lock. But then also to be able to talk, you know, boldly about concepts like love.
Yes.
Right? And then even I think the next step around spirituality,
Hmm.
the spirituality in this work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yes, talking about um, love, and I think in terms of the direct cash transfer work that you were talking about during the pandemic, and all that we did to push so hard to get that established before there was this aha moment of the pandemic combined with George Floyd.
Mm-hmm.
But where at the root of that is is trust,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
us asking big questions of saying, we can talk all the talk we want to talk about helping people and getting services, but do we actually trust? Do we trust people? And do we trust them to make good decisions in their own lives? And do we trust them, therefore, just to give them the money directly, to take out all these layers of intermediation, which indicate that we actually are going to pay other people who we trust more than the end recipients? And I feel like that's just that is one of the key principles. And it's a very loving trust that is at the core
Mm-hmm.
of that direct cash assistance help is to say, we trust you, we believe you. And that is, like you said, it's actually more full growing into that founding idea of let's actually talk to people directly, believe them, take them seriously when they talk about their dreams and aspirations and goals and what's in the way, and help them get there. And that was always at the root of LIFT, was just that
Mhm.
kind of simple idea.
Mhm.
But something like the direct cash assistance is us growing into that much, much more. Because instead of just replicating some of the barriers that traditional social services put between families and money, we're saying, okay, we're going to take those down. I think to your point about growing more into our skin, there has been a way in which it's kind of shedding almost some of the more sanitized
Mhm.
corporate language that was part of the era we grew up in. You know, we started LIFT in the era of the social entrepreneur and a real lionizing of corporate practice, and
Mhm.
bringing that into the nonprofit space and venture philanthropy and all these movements that have done an enormous amount of good in the world.
Mhm.
I think some of what I started to experience, and then I felt you became a kindred spirit on this, was that in the course of having kind of adopted a certain language and lexicon of corporate America and being so focused on metrics and accountability and all that, yes, we like that. We believe in it,
Mhm.
but we dehumanize what is profoundly human work. And we put all sorts of kind of wonky, hard to access language around work that fundamentally is the work of love.
Mhm.
I mean, that's what fuels justice work, is love. And you played such an important role in encouraging the organization to just, let's just talk about love. So, you know, these ideas we've talked of like hope, money, love all the time, they came so much from you saying, no, it's not that common to put love in grant proposals or do other things, but isn't that the work that we're doing here? So let's just talk about it.
Mhm.
And I feel like that was its own really bold step at the time that we did it. And I think, you know, for me, I'm now working in more of an interfaith spiritual
Mhm.
space. But it is all the work of beloved community
Mhm.
formation. And it is, there is something very spirit filled about that work of saying, in addition to needing to talk about what's not working in society, perhaps more importantly, we need to talk about what is the society that we want to create. And that's beloved community. And I feel like that's always been at the core of LIFT, is this at times wildly aspirational, you could call it wildly idealistic, um, view of how people should be treated, how they should be listened to, what resources they should be that they should have access to, how their own dreams should be resourced, and how we should be in relation with one another.
Mhm. Mhm.
And believing that even just within how we behave at LIFT, that was beloved community work. You know, what would it mean to start having board members and funders and community members and staff coming together and breaking down barriers that traditionally divide us to talk about why we LIFT? What is it at the core of us that brings us to this work? And how through telling our stories, we can come to understand one another more, work together in solidarity more, and even within the organization, live out that beloved community kind of society that we would like the world to look like. And certainly that's my ongoing work and passion. And I've always felt that was such an important part of LIFT being LIFT, is that the inside matched the outside, and that we were not going to be a social justice organization that was not working in right relation internally.
Mhm.
And I think there were many times when we chose actually to slow aspects of our external growth, as it were, because we wanted to get things right internally. I think that was a big driver behind the early work that we started doing really deeply on racial equity and racial justice and diversity and inclusion, was saying, before we can even go out into the world talking about these issues, we have to figure out internally
Mhm.
how we, even as a staff and a team, talk about these hard issues. And I think what we learned in the early days of our racial equity work was that, wow, if we as an organization internally can learn how to talk about these most fraught issues of society, history, and justice, and our own behavior and internalized biases, we can do anything. We can make whatever strategic changes we need to make. We can change policy. I really feel like that early DEI, now REI work further unlocked our belief that we could actually do huge things in this world. And I think that's sometimes what people get wrong about this work, is thinking it lives over on the side here, and the mission work is here. And I feel like there's always been an integration at LIFT of saying, no, this is all part of how we're going to learn um, how to be the work, how to be that change that we want to see in the world.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, I feel like it has been, I think, really powerful to just, be simple and bold
Mm,
about how we see our work and the impact that it could make. And yet again, it did take a lot of courage, right? And still does, right? Just to stand up for words that are more values based.
mhm,
But really what we're talking about is um, notions of inequity and othering and, labeling of deservedness. It's very much based on value, right?
mhm.
But that
Yeah,
value is,
yeah,
about hate and distrust and um,
yeah,
humanizing and it's really rooted in our history. So
yes,
to be able to come out strong and talk about values alongside the numbers and the impact and see that they're actually necessarily connected, I think is in some ways like the next horizon, right? It makes me think of well, I was just in a board meeting for the United Way LA, and we were at JPL, at Jet Propulsion Laboratory, able to be in one of those rooms where they're really doing the moonshot, right? And
wow,
had like a fireside chat with Dr. Robert Ross, who's the exiting and super influential president of the California Endowment. And he spoke about exactly this. He said, this work is strategic, right? Check, we got that. It's moral, right? It's the right thing to do. We got that. And it's spiritual.
mm,
And when he said that, I was like, oh, right? Because I feel like that is really the next horizon, right? Is
yeah,
acknowledging the beloved community and like unapologetically standing up for belonging and goodness for us all, right? Just like
yeah,
thinking about the aspirations of the American dream. Yes, it was crafted by people who were not necessarily thinking of what the word all could be, but to, hold that as something that should be true, right? It's the, pursuit for life, liberty, and happiness for
yeah,
all.
yeah,
And it's like that for all part, right? That's I think where it's spiritual. And then I
yeah,
also think about what you were talking about in terms of being in right relationship at the right time, right, with the right people. And and I think about spirituality, I actually think about our meet cute, Kirsten, and just like that, it's the energetic connection, right, that
yeah,
you have with you, like that we had, right, when we first talked, like
yeah,
sparks, right?
yes, It was.
like spontaneous combustion happening
Yeah.
with the people that we're able to attract, like the magnetic, again, like the energetic force, right? That I think lives in within the organization, and that calls us into this work. It
Yes.
calls us into community, it calls us into this work. It calls us, right? And when we know that we are, you know, um, contributing to the bending of the arc, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So yeah, those
Yeah.
are, yeah.
And I mean, this work is so hard. It's it is such an uphill march. Um,
Mm-hmm.
it it is so woefully under-resourced, despite scarcity being a myth, that you've got to have that joy and
Mm-hmm.
that love.
Mm-hmm.
And I loved what what you were saying about spirituality and beloved community. Because for me, a lot of my interest in going to divinity school after passing you the torch at LIFT and pursuing what I'm doing now came from this observation that if you look at most long haul social justice leaders, freedom fighters, and movements over time across continents, across traditions, there is a deep spiritual grounding that drives the vision and the morals and the ethics of those movements. And I think some of that is because there has to be a vision for justice that is articulated in more eternal terms than just the here and now.
Mm-hmm.
That means we're going to keep working towards a vision of justice and liberation and fairness and love that we know may not be fully achieved in our lifetimes,
Yeah,
but we're going to keep working towards it.
right.
That vision helps us withstand intermediate failures without giving up. A lot of it's like, how do we keep on keeping on in this work? Because I do think the longevity and the commitment matters. But it also then is that present time accountability to say, yes, this is the philanthropic fad du jour.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, this is the policy fad du jour or the language du jour. But to us, that doesn't sound right. So we're actually going to go against the grain and we're going to just trust that it's going to come out at some point because we're focused on this longer term vision. And I feel like there have been many junctures of that over time with LIFT, where we kind of went against the grain, we stuck with our vision of what was right, and then a decade or so later, kind of, you
Yeah,
know, the things started trending in the direction towards what we've been
yep.
saying, and we're like,
Again,
okay,
again.
let
Yep.
that be validation. And
Yeah.
I think that happened with constituent and member voice. It happened with talking about love. It happened with the racial equity work.
The financial
It happened
coaching.
with cash transfers
Yeah.
and all of that. And I think there were times too, I mean, even when we came out early on in the start of Black Lives Matter and made a bold statement around Ferguson, interconnecting our work at LIFT with what we were seeing happening in that movement and the atrocities that witnessed in Ferguson. A lot of people said, how do these dots connect?
Mm-hmm.
I remember, we had a caucus before we sent that out saying if we lose funding because of this, or we, in any way lose stature, so be it. This is the right thing to do. And I think there have been many junctures over time of saying we're willing to undergo or withstand certain losses to do what's right.
Mm-hmm.
And again, maybe we grow a little more slowly or do something a little more differently because we want to do it in the right way.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that really is where this broader ethical, and you can definitely call it, spiritual framework and vision keeps us going, keeps us honest,
Mm-hmm.
offers that North Star, but also keeps us connected to one another.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so,
Yes.
yeah.
So, as we think about what's next for Lyft, I think that being able to continue to tap into that, inner core of doing what it's right, despite, right, the, um, um, not the evidence, but maybe like a force, right, that might, be saying otherwise, right?
Mhm.
And being able to believe again in, I think that what is really clear and simple around, the deservedness for the families that we're working with
Yeah.
that are um, so resilient and resourceful and brilliant, and have had too many barriers put up, including the deep psychic barrier around just disbelief in your potential, right,
Mhm.
and in that sense of possibility. And what I would love to envision for Lyft in the next 25 years, and I know that this is quite dramatic because it's, I'm also realistic, but it would be amazing to think about Lyft not being around, right, in the next 25 years, because there has been a more mainstream realization and adoption of, the wanting everybody to be able to have the same access to the resources that will help to unlock their dream and their potential for themselves, for their families, for their communities. And I say that it's dramatic and realizing that there's a lot of change needed in order for that to happen because, again, of systems and policies that are built on right histories of distrust and um, transaction and, more punitive behavior versus being, more turning into humanity and,
Mhm.
being designed to actually make things possible,
Yeah.
right? But I do believe that if we ask that question around what would it take, right, for Lyft
Yeah.
to be out of business 25
Mhm.
years from now, then it changes what we do today. And it
Yes.
actually, I think, offers the opportunity for us to stand really more boldly in that values-based change that I'm talking about. And, knowing that if our systems were operating with more generosity, with hope, money, and love,
Yes.
if you will,
Yes.
right, then it would mean that um, they're more responsive, right, to the needs of individuals, that they see individuals as individuals, and treat them as such, and
Yeah.
allow for their dreams to become reality, like Lyft does, right? So Lyft is really the model, right, for the change that we are able to see more
Yeah.
broadly. Um, fully believe that that can happen. Maybe not
Mm.
25 years, but it can
Yeah.
happen.
May it be so. I think that this was never about starting a corporate entity. It was never about the organization, though it has taken that, building a really strong, healthy organization with good governance and good people and good financial management to get us there. But that, that's been the means to a vision that we've wanted to put out in the world, the means to fueling a movement. And I think that, yeah, it's not about the institution and never has been. And I love that way of looking at it. And I do think so much of this is about what does it take to just keep reinforcing the idea that all people deserve to be valued and treated with dignity and respect and believed in and invested in
Mm-hmm.
and wrapped in community. And I think, over the years when we've always been great about our tracking and data management and had a million metrics and randomized control trials and all of this. What I often think about, though, to your point about simplicity, is when we would do member voice surveys and such, the thing that would always come back as the headline from members is they treated me with kindness.
That's right. Yeah,
The
even,
trinity of
even,
dignity and respect, you
yeah,
know?
even during the pandemic, when there was research being done about the impacts of that giving, right? That's what came across. The money was great, but what was wonderful was that I wasn't alone. And I knew that
Yeah.
somebody was looking out.
Yeah.
That was what, right, made the true difference.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's
Absolutely. I think again, in terms of accountability, which is part of justice work, that thinking, what would it take to not have to be here, is such a great practice of that, of saying, again, this isn't just about institutional self-perpetuation. We've got to get out of that as a social justice sector. This is about continuously asking ourselves, again, what would it mean to mainstream these ideas?
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
should we be so fortunate as to see some of those successes take hold? How can we have the institutional courage to step out of certain lines of work? Or maybe someday, again, may it be so, to actually say, this corporate entity as it once was isn't needed in the same way.
Mm.
Okay, so
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
I
change has been made.
uh,
Let's continue to hold on to that and work
yeah,
towards that. And so grateful, in the 12 years that I've been a part of this organization in relationship with you. Even, after you've transitioned from the CEO to being advisor, friend, colleague, right, in this last stretch, which unbelievably is another 5 years,
I
crazy.
know, going on 5 years.
And the 25 years as well of, planting the seed of this incredible mission and organization that I'm so proud to be a part of and to be in community with you in moving forward. Just cheers and all of that. Thanks,
Cheers.
Kirsten.
Cheers. I have to reiterate that my single proudest accomplishment was being able to so confidently step back from being
Mm.
LIFT's leader and to pass the torch to you with such deep belief in your vision and your integrity and your capability to help LIFT live into its potential. And I feel that that has happened so deeply. I had no idea, on top of handing you the organization at its 20th anniversary, then global pandemic and mass racial reckoning and all
Me
else
either.
would
I didn't know
follow.
that either.
None of us knew that. And you were the right leader for all those times too. And it's just been extraordinary to behold. I toast you and the team. I feel so deeply proud and privileged to still be part of LIFT, and I'm in it for the long haul. So
Awesome.
cheers to you.
Thanks, Kirsten. I'll see you soon.
See you soon.